In the summer of 1943, deep inside a restricted Luftwaffe testing facility near Rechlin, German engineers made a discovery that would shake their confidence in their own weapons development. American bombers were falling over Europe in record numbers, but their .50 caliber Browning machine guns were being salvaged, studied, and test-fired by the very pilots who had shot them down. What the Germans found in those captured weapons would lead to heated internal debates, suppressed reports, and a technological arms race that most historians have overlooked. This is the story of pride, engineering, and the brutal mathematics of aerial combat, told through declassified documents, pilot testimonies, and ballistic tests that revealed an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the enemy's weapon is simply better. If you want to uncover more untold stories from the shadow wars of military technology, hit that subscribe button right now. We dig through archives most channels never touch. Let's get into it. The morning of June 14, 1943, Rechlin-Lurs airfield, 90 kilometers north of Berlin. The air smells of high-octane fuel and burned cordite. Hauptmann Werner Hoffmann walks across the tarmac carrying a clipboard thick with test data. Behind him, mechanics are wheeling a damaged B-17 wing section into Hangar 7. The aluminum skin is punctured, twisted, but the 4 Browning M2 machine guns mounted in the turret housing are intact. Hoffmann has been a test pilot for the Arprobungsstelle Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's primary aircraft and weapons testing center, for 18 months. He has fired every German aircraft weapon in service. Today he will fire an American one. The directive came from Reichsluftfahrtdienst, the Reich Aviation Ministry, 3 weeks ago. Priority classification. The order is simple. Evaluate captured American aircraft weapons. Compare performance to German equivalents. Determine tactical advantages or disadvantages. Hoffmann knows what his superiors want to hear. They want confirmation that German engineering is superior. But Hoffmann is a scientist first, a nationalist second. He will report what the data shows. Inside Hangar 7, the temperature is 15 degrees cooler. The concrete floor is stained with oil. 3.50 caliber Brownings are mounted on a test stand. Barrels pointed toward a reinforced steel backstop 30 meters away. Beside them, for comparison, sits an MG 151/20, the standard cannon on the Bf 109G and FW 190 fighters. The MG 151 fires 20mm explosive shells. The American .50 fires a 12.7mm bullet. On paper, the German weapon should be vastly superior. Explosive rounds versus solid projectiles. But paper doesn't account for reality. Hoffmann adjusts his leather flight cap and approaches the American weapon. The Browning is heavier than he expected, almost 60 kilograms fully loaded. The feed mechanism is elegant, a disintegrating link belt that allows for flexible ammunition storage. German belt-fed systems use non-disintegrating belts that must be manually removed and reloaded. Small difference, perhaps. But in combat, small differences determine who lives and who burns. An Obergefreiter hands Hoffmann ear protection, thick rubber cups that muffle sound to tolerable levels. The weapon is loaded with standard M2 ball ammunition, 750 rounds in a continuous belt. Hoffmann signals readiness. His hand wraps around the spade grip. The trigger is a thumb paddle, not a finger trigger like German designs. He presses it. The sound is not what he expects. German machine guns have a distinct bark, a rhythmic hammering. The Browning produces something closer to a sustained roar, a continuous tearing sound that vibrates through the hangar floor. The muzzle flash is minimal, controlled by a sophisticated flash suppressor. Smoke vents efficiently through lateral ports. The brass casings eject in a glittering arc, clattering onto the concrete in a steady stream. Hoffmann keeps his thumb pressed down, counting seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He releases. The barrel glows faintly red in the dim hangar light. The smell of burned powder hangs heavy. Behind him, an engineer is already checking the chronograph data. Hoffmann walks to the readout station, removes his ear protection. The engineer, Lieutenant Klaus Dietrich, is frowning at the paper tape. Hoffmann asks for the rate of fire. Dietrich hesitates, rechecks his calculations, then looks up. 795 rounds per minute, he says. Continuous fire, no jams, no misfires. Hoffmann feels something tighten in his chest. He asks Dietrich to repeat it. 795 rounds per minute. Hoffmann has fired the MG 151/20 hundreds of times. Its cyclic rate is 750 rounds per minute on a good day, often closer to 700 when barrel heating causes timing issues. The American weapon, chambered in a smaller caliber, operating in a foreign environment with salvaged ammunition, just matched German performance. But rate of fire is only one metric. Hoffmann orders the next test, sustained fire endurance. The Browning is reloaded with a fresh 750-round belt. The test protocol requires continuous fire until either the weapon fails or the ammunition is expended. Hoffman signals the test to begin. This time he does not fire the weapon himself. A fixed mount allows the gun to fire unmanned, controlled by a solenoid trigger system. The roar begins again. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The barrel begins to glow visibly, orange, then yellow, white. German MG-151s typically require barrel changes after 400 rounds of sustained fire to prevent warping. At 45 seconds, the Browning has fired over 600 rounds. The barrel is now white-hot, radiating heat that distorts the air around it. At 60 seconds, the belt runs dry. 750 rounds fired continuously. No stoppage, no failure. Dietrich approaches the weapon cautiously, using an asbestos glove to check the barrel temperature with a pyrometer. 680 degrees Celsius, he reports. Within operational parameters for American specifications, Hoffman knows German barrels would be dangerously deformed at that temperature. The third test is accuracy degradation. Fresh Browning, fresh ammunition. The target is a standard Luftwaffe gunnery panel, a 1.5 meter square with concentric scoring rings. First burst, cold barrel, 50 rounds. The group is tight, most impacts within a 30-centimeter circle at 200 meters. The weapon is allowed to cool for 10 minutes. Second burst, 100 rounds. Group opens slightly to 40 centimeters. Third burst, 150 rounds. No cooling period. Group remains at 40 centimeters. Fourth burst, 200 rounds. Barrel visibly glowing. Group opens to 55 centimeters. The MG-151/20, under identical conditions last month, opened to 80 centimeters by the third burst. Hoffman writes notes in careful block letters. His handwriting is precise, methodical. He dates the entry, 14 Juni 1943. He underlines one sentence twice. Amerikanische Waffe seit Überlegen thermisch stabilet. American weapon demonstrates superior thermal stability. That evening, Hoffman sits in the officers' mess at Rechlin, smoking a cigarette and reviewing his notes. Across the table, Major Erwin Lakoff, a combat veteran with 33 confirmed kills, mostly on the Eastern Front, asks about the day's tests. Hoffman hesitates. Lakoff is old Luftwaffe, a believer in German technical supremacy, but he is also a professional, a man who respects data. Hoffman slides his notebook across the table. Lakoff reads in silence, his expression gradually darkening. When he finishes, he looks up at Hoffman and says something that will stay with Hoffman for the rest of his life. If the Americans are putting weapons like this on every bomber, we need more than courage. We need a miracle. Hoffman asks if Lakoff has encountered the .50 caliber in combat. Lakoff nods slowly. He describes an engagement 3 months prior, April 1943, intercepting a formation of B-17s over Hamburg. He was flying an FW-190A5, closing from stern, low, classic attack position. The bomber's tail gunner opened fire at 600 meters. Lakoff expected the usual American gunnery, poorly aimed, panic fire. Instead, the rounds came in a sustained stream, tracers walking across his line of approach with mechanical precision. His windscreen took 3 hits. The armor plate behind his seat took 7. One round punched through his left aileron. Another shattered his canopy frame. He broke off the attack not because he was afraid, but because continuing meant certain death. He landed at Jever Airfield with 41 holes in his aircraft. His crew chief counted them personally. Lakoff tells Hoffman that the Americans trained their gunners differently than Germans trained theirs. German doctrine emphasizes short-aimed bursts to conserve ammunition. American doctrine emphasizes volume of fire, saturation, creating a wall of lead that makes approach angles almost impossible. And the .50 caliber Browning, with its high rate of fire and reliability, is the perfect tool for that doctrine. Lakoff taps ash from his cigarette and says quietly, "We designed our weapons for dueling. They designed theirs for killing." Hoffman asks if Lakoff thinks the Luftwaffe High Command will listen to his test results. Lakoff laughs, a short, bitter sound. "They will read your report," he says, "and then they will tell you to repeat the tests until you get results they like." But Hoffman is stubborn. He will write an honest report. He will submit it through proper channels. He will let the data speak. June 15, 1943. Hoffman expands the test program. He requests additional captured .50 caliber weapons, different variants. The Browning M2 comes in aircraft, vehicular, and ground-mounted versions. He wants to test them all. The Luftwaffe supply depot at Oranienburg has 17 captured American machine guns in storage, salvaged from downed bombers and fighters. 12 are functional after minor repairs. Hoffman has them transported to Rechlin under armed guard. He also requests MG-151/20 cannons from active units for direct comparison testing. He wants weapons that have seen combat, not pristine factory samples. He wants real-world performance data. By June 20th, the hangar is filled with weapons. American Brownings on one side, German MG-151s on the other. Hoffmann's test team has grown to 7 personnel, 3 engineers, 2 armorers, 1 ballistic specialist, and a documentation clerk who photographs everything. The comparison tests begin on June 22nd. Test protocol. Identical firing sequences for both weapons, measured under controlled conditions. Rate of fire, accuracy, reliability, ammunition capacity, maintenance requirements, and combat survivability. The first metric, rate of fire, is already known. Browning M2 750 to 800 rounds per minute, MG 151/20 to 700 to 750 rounds per minute. The difference seems small, but in combat, 50 additional rounds per minute means 5 additional bullets in a 3-second burst. 5 bullets that could hit an engine, sever a control cable, kill a pilot. The second metric is accuracy. Both weapons are mounted on precision test stands, firing at 200-meter targets. The Browning groups are consistently tighter, with 15 to 20% less dispersion than the MG 151. Hoffmann suspects this is due to superior barrel, rifling, and tighter manufacturing tolerances. The third metric is reliability. This is where the data becomes politically dangerous. Over 5 days of testing, firing a total of 12,000 rounds through 6 different Browning M2s, the test team records 11 malfunctions. 9 are minor, easily cleared. 2 require armorer intervention. Malfunction rate 0.092%. The MG 151/20 firing 10,000 rounds through 5 weapons records 31 malfunctions. 7 require armorer intervention. Malfunction rate 0.31%, 3 times higher. Hoffmann knows what this data means. In a combat sortie lasting 20 minutes, with continuous firing, a German pilot can expect at least 1 significant jam. An American gunner statistically might experience none. Jams mean death. A jammed gun in a turning dogfight, a jammed gun during a head-on pass, these are scenarios that German pilots face daily. The fourth metric is ammunition capacity and flexibility. The Browning uses a disintegrating link belt, allowing ammunition to be stored in flexible containers, loaded quickly, and mixed with different bullet types in any sequence. Tracer, armor-piercing, incendiary, ball, in whatever pattern the gunner desires. The MG 151 uses a non-disintegrating belt that must be preloaded with fixed shell types, laboriously assembled by hand. Changing ammunition types in the field requires complete disassembly and reloading. In combat conditions, flexibility is life. The Browning offers it. The MG 151 does not. The fifth metric, maintenance, reveals another uncomfortable truth. The Browning M2 is designed for field maintenance by minimally trained personnel. It can be stripped and reassembled in under 10 minutes with basic tools. The headspace and timing, critical for preventing catastrophic failures, can be adjusted in under 2 minutes using built-in gauges. The MG 151, by contrast, requires specialized tools, factory-trained armorers, and frequent barrel replacements. Hoffmann interviews ground crews from active fighter units. They report that MG 151 maintenance takes, on average, 30 minutes per weapon, and many units lack sufficient trained armorers. Aircraft are grounded waiting for weapon servicing. American bombers shot down and examined show evidence of extremely rapid turret gun replacement. Entire Browning assemblies swapped out in minutes. German fighters, if a gun fails, remain grounded for hours. The sixth metric, combat survivability, is tested through ballistic damage simulation. Both weapons are subjected to simulated battle damage, small caliber hits to the receiver, feed mechanism, and barrel. The Browning continues functioning with significant damage. The receiver housing is thick, over-engineered. The recoil system is robust. Multiple components can fail before the weapon stops firing. The MG 151, lighter and more compact, fails more quickly. A single 7.92mm round through the receiver jams the bolt. Another through the belt feed mechanism renders it inoperable. German design philosophy prioritizes weight savings and compactness. American design philosophy prioritizes durability and reliability. In the brutal calculus of air combat, durability wins. By July 3, 1943, Hoffmann has completed all primary tests. He begins writing his report. The document is 53 pages, typed on a manual Olympia typewriter in the Rechlin Administrative Building. The language is clinical, dispassionate. No emotional commentary, just data, charts, photographs. The conclusion section is 3 paragraphs. Hoffmann chooses his words carefully. He writes, "The American Browning M2 caliber .50 machine gun demonstrates superior performance to the German MG 151/20 in 5 of 6 critical performance categories. Rate of fire is comparable. Accuracy, reliability, ammunition flexibility, maintenance, and combat survivability all favor the American design. From a tactical perspective, the Browning M2 provides American bomber crews with a significant defensive advantage. From an engineering perspective, the weapon represents a mature design philosophy emphasizing operational reliability over theoretical performance. He does not write what he is thinking, that Germany is losing the technological war, that the Luftwaffe is outgunned, that pride and ideology have blinded the leadership to these realities. The report is submitted to Oberst Hans-Joachim Hermann, the commanding officer of Armeebündnis Rechlin, on July 8, 1943. Hermann reads it over 2 days. On July 10th, he summons Hoffmann to his office. Hermann is 41 years old, a decorated pilot, a party member. His office is austere: a steel desk, 2 chairs, a portrait of Hitler on the wall, a map of Europe with red pins marking Luftwaffe bases. Hermann gestures for Hoffmann to sit. He places the report on the desk between them. For 30 seconds, neither man speaks. Then Hermann asks if Hoffmann stands by his findings. Hoffmann says he does. Hermann asks if Hoffmann understands the implications. Hoffmann says he does. Hermann leans back in his chair and says, "This report will not make you popular." Hoffmann replies, "I did not write it to be popular. I wrote it to be accurate." Hermann almost smiles. Almost. He tells Hoffmann that the report will be forwarded to Berlin to the technical branch of the Reichsluftfahrtdienst. He warns Hoffmann that it will likely be suppressed, ignored, or rewritten by someone more politically astute. Hoffmann says he expected as much. Hermann stands, extends his hand. "You are a good officer, Hoffmann. Honest, brave, foolish." Hoffmann shakes his hand and leaves. The report reaches Berlin on July 15, 1943. It lands on the desk of Generalmajor Adolf Galland, general of the fighter arm, one of the most respected combat pilots in the Luftwaffe. 104 confirmed kills, a man who understands air combat at a visceral level. Galland reads Hoffmann's report in one sitting. He reads it again, then he calls a meeting with his staff officers. The meeting takes place July 18, 1943, in a conference room at the Luftwaffe High Command building on Leipziger Strasse. 8 officers attend. Galland opens the meeting by reading selected passages from Hoffmann's report aloud. When he finishes, the room is silent. Then the objections begin. Major Rudolf Braun, a technical liaison from the Reichsluftfahrtdienst, argues that the tests are flawed. He suggests that the captured American weapons were specially selected, that they represent the best examples, not average performance. Galland asks if Braun has evidence for this claim. Braun admits he does not. He then argues that the MG 151/20 fires explosive rounds, which are inherently more destructive than solid projectiles, and that this compensates for any deficiencies in rate of fire or reliability. Galland counters, destructive potential is meaningless if the rounds do not hit the target. A reliable weapon that fires more rounds has a higher probability of scoring hits. Simple mathematics. Another officer, Oberstleutnant Dietrich Peltz, suggests that German pilots are superior in training and tactics, and that superior human factors outweigh weapon performance. Galland cuts him off. "Superior training," he says, "does not stop bullets. I have lost pilots, good pilots, exceptional pilots, because their guns jammed at the critical moment. Courage does not clear a malfunctioning feed mechanism. Skill does not prevent a warped barrel." The room goes quiet again. Galland continues. He tells them that he has read combat reports from the Western Front. Pilots are reporting increasing difficulty engaging American heavy bombers. The defensive firepower is overwhelming. Approaching a B-17 formation from any angle means flying through a storm of .50 caliber fire. German fighters are being hit, damaged, destroyed before they can close to effective firing range. And when German guns do fire, when they do score hits, the results are often disappointing. 20mm explosive shells against American aircraft structures often fail to cause catastrophic damage. American airframes are robust, over-engineered, redundant. They absorb damage and keep flying. German fighters, by contrast, are lightweight, designed for agility. A single .50 caliber round in the wrong place can down a German aircraft. Galland tells his staff that Hoffmann's report confirms what he has suspected for months. German aircraft weapons development has stagnated while American development has accelerated. He says the MG 151 was a good weapon in 1940. It is now 1943 and it is obsolete. He says Germany needs a new generation of weapons, higher rate of fire, greater reliability, or it needs to license produce captured American designs. That last suggestion causes an uproar. License produce enemy weapons? Unthinkable. Galland shrugs. Pride, he says, is a luxury Germany can no longer afford. The meeting ends with no consensus. Galland forwards Hoffmann's report to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, with a personal cover letter recommending urgent action. Göring's response arrives August 2, 1943. It is brief, dismissive. Göring writes, "German engineering is the finest in the world. We do not require enemy weapons to achieve victory. Continue improving existing systems. The report is archived. No action is taken. But the story does not end there. Copies of Hoffman's report circulate among Luftwaffe technical staff, passed hand to hand, quietly, almost subversively. Combat pilots hear rumors. The Americans have better guns. The testing confirmed it. Morale suffers. Some pilots begin to doubt their equipment. Others double down on aggression, trying to compensate for technical deficiencies with tactical boldness. The result is higher casualties. By autumn 1943, Luftwaffe fighter losses over Germany are exceeding replacement rates. By early 1944, the attrition is catastrophic. The reasons are complex. Allied numerical superiority, American long-range escort fighters, improved Allied tactics. But one factor often overlooked is the simple reality that American defensive armament, particularly the .50 caliber Browning, has made attacking bombers vastly more dangerous than German planners anticipated. Hoffman continues his work at Rechlin through 1943 and into 1944. He tests other captured weapons: American P-51 Mustang wing guns, British Hispano 20mm cannons, Soviet Shvia-K cannons. He writes more reports. Some are read, most are ignored. In March 1944, Rechlin is bombed by the U.S. 8th Air Force. Hangar 7 is destroyed. 3 engineers are killed. Hoffmann survives. He is transferred to Tarnowitz, another testing facility on the Baltic coast, farther from Allied bomber range. There he continues testing, refining, documenting, but by mid-1944, German war production is collapsing. Resources are scarce, new weapon development has effectively stopped. The Luftwaffe is fighting with 1942 equipment against 1944 enemies. In December 1944, Hoffmann is called to Berlin for a final meeting. The Luftwaffe High Command wants updated assessments on captured American weapons. By now, the Germans have recovered hundreds of examples: Brownings from bombers, 50 calibers from P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs, even examples from ground vehicles captured in France. Hoffmann presents his findings. The data has not changed. The Browning M2 remains superior in almost every measurable category. He adds one new observation. American weapons captured in late 1944 show evidence of continued design refinement, improved barrel materials, enhanced feed mechanisms, even more reliable operation. German weapons from the same period show evidence of declining manufacturing quality. Machining tolerances are looser, materials are inferior. Substitute alloys, inferior steels, anything to keep production going. The performance gap is widening. One officer asks Hoffmann if there is any German weapon that matches or exceeds the Browning M2. Hoffmann hesitates. He mentions the MG-131, a 30mm machine gun with slightly higher rate of fire, but it is heavier, less reliable, and its adoption has been slow. He mentions experimental weapons, electrical firing systems, higher velocity designs. None have entered production. The officer asked what Hoffmann would recommend if he had unlimited resources and authority. Hoffmann says he would immediately cease production of the MG-151/20 and replace it with a licensed copy of the Browning M2, rechambered for German 30mm ammunition if necessary. The room erupts in protest. Hoffmann shouts over them, "I am telling you what works, not what you want to hear." The meeting ends badly. Hoffmann returns to Tarnowitz in late December 1944. The facility is operating at minimal capacity. Fuel is scarce. Electricity is rationed. Test flights are rare. Hoffmann spends his days reviewing old data, writing reports that no one will read. In January 1945, the Soviet offensive begins. Tarnowitz is evacuated in early February. Hoffmann is ordered to destroy all sensitive documents. He burns most of them, but he keeps one copy of his original June 1943 report hidden inside his personal logbook. He will carry it through the collapse of Germany, through his capture by British forces in May 1945, through his internment and eventual release in 1946. That report, and others like it, will later surface in Allied intelligence archives. They will be studied by American and British weapons analysts, who will use German testing data to validate their own designs. The irony is not lost on Hoffmann. The Germans tested American weapons to prove their own superiority, and instead proved the opposite. Post-war, Hoffmann settles in Munich. He works as an engineer for BMW, designing automotive components. He avoids aviation work. The memories are too painful. In the 1970s, he is contacted by a British historian researching Luftwaffe testing programs. Hoffmann agrees to an interview. He is 71 years old, retired, living in a modest apartment near the Englischer Garten. The historian asks about the Browning M2 tests. Hoffmann retrieves his old logbook, the one he carried through the war. He shows the historian his 1943 report. The pages are yellowed, fragile. The typewriter ink has faded, but is still legible. The historian asks if Hoffman ever regretted writing the report. Hoffman thinks for a long time before answering. He says, "I regret that no one listened. I regret that pride killed my comrades. I regret that we wasted years trying to prove we were superior instead of admitting we could learn from our enemies." He dies in 1979. The logbook and the report are donated to the Deutsches Museum. They are filed in the Aviation Archive, rarely examined. But the technical truth Hoffman documented remains relevant. The Browning M2.50 caliber machine gun, designed in 1921 by John Browning, remains in military service to this day. It has been produced in numbers exceeding 3 million. It arms aircraft, vehicles, ships, fortifications. It has fought in every major conflict since World War II. The MG 151/20, once the pride of German engineering, is a museum piece. The reasons are the reasons Hoffman identified in June 1943: reliability, maintainability, combat durability. These are not glamorous qualities. They do not inspire propaganda posters or stirring speeches, but they win wars. The Germans learned this too late. The Americans understood it from the beginning. And in the brutal arithmetic of industrial warfare, understanding the difference between elegant design and functional design is the difference between victory and defeat. The Browning M2's development history reveals why it outperformed the MG 151. John Moses Browning, the weapons designer, was not an academic engineer. He was a pragmatist, a gunsmith who tested his designs in the field, often personally. He understood that military weapons must function in extremes: desert heat, Arctic cold, mud, sand, salt water. The Browning M2 was over-engineered deliberately. The receiver was thicker than necessary. The recoil system had redundant components. The feed mechanism had generous tolerances. These choices added weight. They made the weapon more expensive to manufacture. But they ensured that when a soldier, sailor, or airman pressed the trigger, the weapon fired. Every time, without fail. This philosophy, functionality over elegance, characterized American weapons development throughout the war. German design philosophy was different. German engineers prioritized efficiency, compactness, theoretical performance. The MG 151 was a marvel of miniaturization. It packed tremendous firepower into a small, lightweight package. On paper, it was superior. In practice, under combat stress, it failed more often. The disparity extended beyond the weapons themselves to the logistics systems supporting them. American weapons were designed to be supported by American industry, which was the most productive in the world. When a Browning M2 wore out, a new one was manufactured. When parts broke, replacements were shipped. The supply chain was robust, redundant, seemingly infinite. German weapons were designed for a different reality. Germany's industrial capacity was limited. Resources were scarce. The MG 151 was designed to be repairable, rebuildable, to last through shortages. But design intent does not overcome material reality. By 1944, German armories could not produce enough replacement parts. Weapons failed and were not repaired. Aircraft were grounded. Pilots flew with malfunctioning guns or no guns at all. The Americans never faced this problem. Their supply chain ensured that every bomber, every fighter carried fully functional weapons, fully loaded. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots was significant. Flying into combat knowing your weapons might fail is terrifying. Pilots reported hesitation, second-guessing, delayed firing. These delays cost lives. A pilot who hesitates for half a second in a high-speed engagement misses his shot. The target escapes. The opportunity is lost. American gunners, by contrast, fired with confidence. Their weapons worked. They knew it. They trained with them. They trusted them. Trust is an intangible quality, but it shapes combat outcomes. A confident gunner fires earlier, fires longer, fires more accurately. Confidence is built on reliability. Reliability is built on engineering. The Browning M2 was reliably engineered. The MG 151 was brilliantly but unreliably engineered. The distinction is everything. There's a broader lesson here about technological development during wartime. Nations at war face a choice: innovate constantly, pursuing ever more advanced designs, or perfect existing designs, making them as reliable and producible as possible. Germany chose innovation. Throughout the war, German engineers developed jet aircraft, rocket weapons, guided missiles, advanced radar, all groundbreaking technologies. But many of these innovations arrived too late, in too small numbers, or were too complex to field effectively. The Me-262 jet fighter, for example, was a revolutionary design. It was also mechanically unreliable, difficult to maintain, and required highly trained pilots and ground crews. Only about 1,400 were built. Compare this to the P-51 Mustang, a conventional piston engine fighter. Reliable, easy to maintain. Produced in numbers exceeding 15,000. The Mustang won the air war over Europe not because it was more advanced, but because it was more available. The same principle applied to weapons. The Browning M2 won not through brilliance, but through consistency. Hoffman understood this. His report and his subsequent work was an attempt to inject realism into German strategic thinking. He was not a defeatist. He was a realist. He saw that Germany's technological lead, real in 1939 and 1940, had evaporated by 1943. He saw that American and British engineering, often dismissed as crude or unimaginative, had caught up and in many areas surpassed German capabilities. He tried to warn his superiors. He was ignored. The reasons for this are complex: ideology, pride, institutional inertia, and the political danger of suggesting that the enemy might be doing something better. Nazi Germany was built on myths of Aryan superiority, German excellence, the inevitable triumph of the Reich. Admitting that American workers were producing better weapons undermined those myths. So the myths were maintained even as the reality contradicted them, even as German pilots died. The testing at Rechlin also revealed differences in ammunition design. The Browning M2 fired a variety of 50 caliber ammunition types: M2 ball, M1 incendiary, M8 armor-piercing incendiary, M20 armor-piercing incendiary tracer. Each type was optimized for specific targets. The incendiary rounds were devastating against aircraft fuel tanks. The armor-piercing rounds could penetrate engine blocks. The versatility allowed American gunners to tailor their loadouts for the mission. German 20mm ammunition was primarily high explosive with some armor-piercing variants. But the explosive shells, while destructive on direct hits, often failed to cause sufficient damage with near misses. American .50 caliber ammunition had greater effective range due to higher muzzle velocity and flatter trajectory. In aerial combat, range is survival. The ability to engage targets at 800 meters versus 600 meters means starting to inflict damage before the enemy can effectively return fire. American bombers exploited this, training gunners to fire at maximum effective range, forcing German fighters to fly through sustained fire during their approach. Another factor Hoffman noted was ammunition manufacturing quality. American .50 caliber rounds were produced to exacting standards. Powder loads were consistent. Primer reliability was near perfect. Projectile weights were uniform. This consistency translated to predictable ballistics, which meant accurate fire. German 20mm ammunition by 1943 was showing quality control problems. Powder loads varied, primers misfired, shell cases cracked under pressure. Some of this was due to material shortages. Germany was running out of copper for primers, resorting to inferior substitutes. Running out of brass for casings, using mild steel instead. These shortcuts degraded performance. A weapon is only as good as its ammunition. Feed a perfect gun bad ammunition and it becomes a paperweight. The Americans understood this. They invested in ammunition production infrastructure as heavily as they invested in weapons. The Germans did not. By late 1943, Hoffman began testing captured American ammunition alongside captured weapons. The results were illuminating. American ammunition fired through German weapons when adapters could be fabricated, often improved German weapon performance. The opposite was not true. German ammunition fired through American weapons caused increased malfunctions. The American weapons were tolerant of lower quality inputs. The German weapons were not. This tolerance, this built-in margin for error, is a form of engineering genius that is easy to overlook. It is not flashy. It does not appear in propaganda films. But it is the difference between a weapon that works in a laboratory and a weapon that works in a war. Hoffman also examined the maintenance logs from captured American bombers. These logs, if recovered intact, provided insight into American operational practices. What he found surprised him. American ground crews replaced Browning M2 South on a time-based schedule, regardless of whether they showed signs of wear. Guns were swapped out after a certain number of flight hours or rounds fired, whichever came first. The removed guns were sent to depots for refurbishment. This preventive maintenance approach minimized in-flight failures. German practice was reactive maintenance. Guns were serviced only when they malfunctioned. This saved resources in the short term but guaranteed higher in-flight failure rates. Again, American logistics supported a maintenance philosophy that German logistics could not. American industry could afford to manufacture extra weapons for rotation. German industry could not. The human cost of this disparity is difficult to quantify but impossible to ignore. How many Luftwaffe pilots died because their guns jammed? How many attacks were aborted because of weapon malfunctions? How many opportunities were lost? The numbers are unknown, but the phenomenon was widespread. After-action reports from German fighter units frequently mention weapon failures. Pilots returning from missions with unfired ammunition because their guns jammed on the first burst. Pilots unable to engage because one or more weapons were inoperative. Pilots killed while trying to clear a jam, distracted, vulnerable, shot down by an alert American gunner. These deaths were preventable. The technology to prevent them existed. It was mounted on every American bomber. In contrast, American after-action reports rarely mention weapon failures. Browning M2 South, when properly maintained, simply worked. American gunners reported thousands of rounds fired per mission without a single malfunction. This reliability allowed American bomber formations to maintain effective defensive fire throughout their missions. Even heavily damaged bombers, limping home on 2 engines, trailing smoke, could still defend themselves if their guns worked. And the guns worked. German fighters learned to fear crippled bombers as much as healthy ones. A bomber with 1 operational turret could still kill you. The Browning M2 made that possible. The story of German pilots testing captured .50 caliber Brownings is also a story about institutional failure. The data was clear. The conclusions were undeniable. Yet the Luftwaffe High Command did nothing. Why? Part of the answer is bureaucratic. Changing weapon systems mid-war is enormously difficult. It requires retooling factories, retraining personnel, updating tactical doctrine, modifying aircraft mounts. These changes take time and resources. Germany by 1943 had neither. But bureaucratic challenges do not fully explain the inaction. The deeper issue was ideological. Nazi Germany's leadership could not admit that American engineering was superior. To do so would undermine the racial and cultural superiority myths that underpinned the regime. So the data was suppressed. The reports were ignored. The pilots continued to fly with inferior weapons and they died. There is a grim irony in the fact that the Germans, having captured and tested the Browning M2, did not adopt it, while the Americans, having captured and tested German weapons, incorporated useful features into their own designs. Post-war American weapons development shows clear influence from German innovations, improved trigger mechanisms, better feed systems, advanced sighting technologies. The Americans were not ideologically opposed to learning from the enemy. The Germans were. This intellectual flexibility, this willingness to adopt the best ideas regardless of origin, gave the Allies a decisive advantage. Wars are won by pragmatists, not purists. Hoffman's 1943 report, rediscovered in archives decades later, has become a key primary source for historians studying wartime weapons development. It is cited in academic papers, military training documents, engineering textbooks. It is a case study in how to conduct rigorous technical evaluation. It is also a cautionary tale about the cost of ignoring data. Hoffman wrote his report with the hope that it would improve Luftwaffe combat effectiveness. Instead, it was filed away and forgotten. The pilots who might have benefited from better weapons never received them. The bureaucrats who might have acted on the data never read it. The system failed, not because of lack of information, but because of lack of will. In the decades since World War II, the Browning M2 has been studied, reverse engineered, and imitated by dozens of nations. It is one of the most widely copied weapons in history. The design has been adapted for countless applications: aircraft, helicopters, tanks, boats, fortifications, even spacecraft. The MG 151/20 influenced some post-war designs, particularly in Eastern Europe, but it never achieved the universal adoption of the Browning. The reasons are the reasons Hoffman documented: reliability, maintainability, durability. These qualities are timeless. They are as relevant today as they were in 1943. Modern militaries still prioritize these qualities when selecting weapons. The flashiest design is not always the best design. The best design is the one that works every time under the worst conditions. The testing at Recklinlerz in June 1943 was a microcosm of the larger war. One side had better engineering, better logistics, better industrial capacity. The other side had courage, skill, and innovation, but not enough of the fundamentals. Courage cannot overcome a jammed gun. Skill cannot fix a broken supply chain. Innovation cannot compensate for inadequate production. The Germans learned these lessons painfully, gradually, at enormous cost. The Americans understood them from the beginning, not because Americans were smarter or more talented, but because American strategic culture prioritized practical solutions over elegant theories. This cultural difference, as much as any technological factor, determined the war's outcome. Hoffman spent the last years of his life trying to understand why his warnings went unheeded. He concluded that organizations, like individuals, struggle to accept uncomfortable truths. Admitting error requires humility. Changing course requires courage. The Luftwaffe High Command had neither. They were trapped by their own mythology, unable to see reality clearly, unwilling to adapt. This failure was not unique to Germany. It is a universal human flaw. But in war, such flaws are lethal. The pilots paid the price. Hoffman, who tried to save them with data and honesty, lived with the guilt of having failed, not because his work was inadequate, but because the system was incapable of listening. The legacy of the Browning M2 versus MG 151 comparison. extends beyond World War II. It informs modern defense acquisition strategies. It is taught at military academies. It shapes how engineers think about weapons design. The lesson is simple. Build systems that work reliably under stress, not systems that look impressive on paper. This lesson was learned at great cost. It should not be forgotten. The 50 caliber Browning, that massive, brutish, inelegant weapon, remains in service because it embodies this lesson. It is not beautiful, it is not revolutionary, it is simply reliable. And in war, reliability is everything. The story of how German test pilots confirmed their own weapons were outmatched is just one thread in the tangled history of World War II's technological arms race. If you want more deep dives into the engineering battles that shaped history, hit subscribe right now. We publish stories like this every week, stories the history books skip over. Thanks for watching.